YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back, and today's video is for the biggest winners of the 2019 NBA draft, in my opinion. I got four big winners. I could sit here and list off the teams that did very well and made their team better. There's a bunch of teams, but I wanted to make this unique and really just point out those four. I had four teams that were huge winners. If you want to see more of in-depth video and grades pick by pick through the first round, and then also my best second round picks. That's all in one video, the most recent video we did. It's also be popping up in the top right of your screen right now. So if you want to see more in depth on that, you can check that out. Right before we get started with this one, we have a new subscriber goal of 40K by the end of this year. Be much appreciated if you can subscribe to the channel. We have daily sports videos. We specialize in the NFL. We got plenty of NBA coverage too. We'll be covering the NFL season fully. Can't wait for that. There's our Twitter in the top right. Also a link in the description. Clicking the like button be much appreciated as well. So the big four, the biggest four winners here from the 2019 NBA draft, in my opinion. I'm going to break them down 4-1. Number 4 is going to be the Boston Celtics. And, first glance, did they get anybody, that's going to make you jump out of your seat? Well, maybe actually Carson Edwards to me, since they got him in the second round. I think it's somewhat of a steal, and they needed a point guard. But other than that, they just got a bunch of good players. Nobody that's you're going to go crazy about. But as a whole here, you got a bunch of good players. And the key players that can contribute right away. It seems like they got a lot of guards, but their bench is going to be really good. And even some of these guys can start, depending on what they do in free agency. But, Carson Edwards, I think, is their best pick value-wise. The best player they got is obviously Romeo Langford, who can score in multiple different ways. So they'll be using him. Grant Williams can play the 3 or the 4 spot. High motor guy. Very good at defense. Not, a great three-point shooter or anything, but can shoot. I like his game a lot because he's just, he's a high motor guy, and he can do so many different things. And then, Carson Edwards is a pure scorer. Can hit that deep 3, can drive. And then Tremont Waters there from LSU, who is a sleeper pick for them. He can make the team be a solid rotation guy early in his career. But mainly looking at those 3 guys, I think could contribute very early on. So, right off the bat, they didn't really go with big need. They kind of went best available with Romeo Langford and Grant Williams, which Grant Williams is somewhat of a need, but you got to respect it. They stay true to their board. You got 5 guys in the starting lineup, obviously. You got to go best available, a guy that can really contribute and make a high impact. So that's the reason for going with a guy like Romeo Langford. But then they get Carson Edwards, which I think they needed a point guard with Kyrie Irving possibly out. So the point guard of the future, maybe he won't be a starter right away or anything. He was a second-round pick, but I think he's better than the second-round pick. So basically, why the Celtics made this list, they got a bunch of players that can contribute right away. Got a bunch of good basketball players. That's what they did here. A lot of guys that can contribute and help their team. And they're going to have a really good bench, really good rotation, I should say. Winner number 3, third place here for me, is going to be the Pelicans. A pretty obvious choice. And then you look at the 3 players they got. It's nothing like crazy. Like, wow, how did they get those players, So that's why they're not 1 or 2, but they're still number 3 because they got 3 players that really could start right away. Zion will start. He's going to be their best player right away. A guy that's going to play the 4, could play the 3 spot as well. Then Jackson Hayes will be their center. Very solid center. Was the top one of the draft. So they're really, beefing up the front court, I guess. So it's going to be good for a long time. And it's really not a huge problem. Anthony Davis is gone because of that. And Nickeil Alexander, he can play the 1 or the 2. So that helps in a lot of ways. That's really why I like that pick. Because, he's probably going to start at the 2. I don't mean he could start in the starting rotation, but I meant that's where he'll start off his career, which they do need unless they get Drew Holiday back, because another guy that's played the 1 or 2 over the years. Then Alonzo Ball, maybe if he doesn't turn out the player he can be, which we think he's going to be good, but we really don't know yet, then this guy can play the 1 spot as well. So got 3 guys that contribute right away, and possibly more than just contribute right away. But again, the top 2 teams, I like what they did a little more, mainly because this isn't nothing surprising here with the New Orleans Pelicans. This is about what they should have done, and a good job to them with their trades. So that brings it to 3. It's a good number 3 there. Very close to number 2. Number 2 is going to be the Memphis Grizzlies. Only got 2 players, but wow. And we're looking back last year, too. They got Jaren Jackson Jr., who's my number 2 player on my board. They get him, and they get my number 2 player this year in Ja Morant, pretty much everyone's number 2 player. And they get their point guard of the future, the most important position on the floor, in my opinion. I think most people's opinion, a guy that can score in multiple different ways and really, facilitate the ball, be that floor general at the same time of being a freak athlete. So it's a great pick. It was the obvious choice, though, but then they get an absolute steal on Brandon Clark with 21st overall. So they get 2 players in my top 10 on my board with having picks 2 and 21. So that's very impressive. Pairing those guys with the young guy like Jaren Jackson from last year, very impressive. So it's just guys that really fit, and the plug and play guys that are going to makes this team a lot better right away. A good young team that can make some noise early on here. So that is number 2. Who's number 1? It's going to be the Atlanta Hawks. 3 good players that can contribute right away. And I know DeAndre Hunter is kind of the feature guy and the best player they got, and I'm on board with that. And he was their first pick, 4th overall. But I kind of feature Cam Reddish a little more here because that was the pick that made them number 1, really, for me. I mean, love the pick for Hunter. He was my number 3 player in the draft, actually. I love his defense. It's elite as a prospect-wise, not as NBA-wise yet. And then he can score. People forget he can score. He can score in multiple different ways. He's clutch. Seems like he's a good leader already. So that's their best player, best pick. He's a plug-and-play small forward for them. And then Bruno Fernando, they get in the second round, who could have been a first-round pick, and they needed a center. He can honestly start early on in his career here and make an impact. Maybe get his way in a rotation first, obviously. But then the Cam Reddish pick, why is that one that really sets at the top? Because I think he's a great fit right in between Trae Young and DeAndre Hunter. I think there's something about Cam Reddish. There's always, here and there, you always get those players that you just see something in them. It's an NBA player. Throw out how he played this year. Just throw it away. Forget about it. I like him in that system. I like him on that team. Fits right in there, like I said, right in between in the starting lineup, Trae Young and DeAndre Hunter. He's got the great length. He can shoot. He can shoot a lot better than people think. And to get him at 10 mainly, that's just it's to me a steal. But if you watch my pre-draft videos, I had a clear top 8, a top 8 that can make an instant impact. And I think no matter the need, those top 8 should have went in the top 8. They should have went top 8. And Cam Reddish was one of those guys, and he went 10th. So I think some teams are going to regret passing on him. I know it's only a couple. He only dropped to 10, but still, to me, it's actually a steal. I think he's going to be a heck of an NBA player, and they got 3 potential long-term starters here, and I think 2 right away. Could be 3. So the Hawks, to me, and I'm never a huge fan of trading up and giving up picks, but they didn't give up pick 10, which they got Cam Reddish, and to trade up and make the correct pick with DeAndre Hunter. It just everything going into this. Excellent job for the Hawks. I've doubted them a couple years ago what they were doing, their plan, but it worked out real. It looks like it's working out real well. It's a good young team, could be playoff bound already. So I really like what they're doing, and they win the draft in my opinion. I didn't want to make a graphic calling somebody a loser. Maybe that's just not me. Maybe, but it's pretty obvious that everyone's on the same page that the Suns weren't a big winner. I think people are bashing the Cam Johnson pick a little too much. He's a good shooter. He'll pair well with Devin Booker and those guys, and they had a plan. But trading back, I didn't think at least they traded back and got him, So that's a good thing, I guess. But the trade itself, I think they could have got a little more. If you watch the pre-draft trade scenarios, I thought they would do that trade almost exactly with the team, the T-Wolves too. But I thought they would get much more. So pretty surprising they didn't get more. They overdraft the player, but it's still a good shooter. I think he fits them, so it's not the worst pick. The Ty Jerome pick I don't like. I'm not a huge fan of him. He's a good basketball player, can be good, not doubting him. But the trade up, to me, it seemed like their top 2 players in the draft. Look at their big board. It was probably Zion, Ja Morant, R.J. Barrett, guys like that. Maybe DeAndre Hunter. But then it looked like it was Cam Johnson and Ty Jerome. They had the opportunity to get a guy like Kobe White. But obviously Ty Jerome was higher on their board, thought it was more of a fit. A little surprising to me. So interesting way to go about things with their trades. I wasn't really agreeing with their trades, but the Cam Johnson pick, a little early, people were bashing a little too much, but they were a team that stood out. Is kind of like, what are you doing? The Sixers kept trading. They had opportunities to get better players. I thought they still did. They did good. They got better, but so they weren't really a loser. But that was a team that stood out. They had an opportunity to get. I mean, they're trying to clear the space though to re-sign, so it made sense. So they're definitely not a loser. Just something I noticed. But yeah, that's gonna do it. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this. Plenty of NBA content to come. We're gonna talk free agency. That's gonna be wild. NBA free agency and NFL season. Cannot wait for that. We'll cover that. We got more predictions on the way for the upcoming NFL season. Please subscribe if you haven't done it yet. That'd be much appreciated. Click that button right there to subscribe. That's gonna do it for this one though. Thanks everyone for the support. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.